For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
So the real question, Russ, is how much pumpkin is too much pumpkin?
There is no such thing as too much pumpkin.
And I knew you were going to say that, whereas I would say any pumpkin is too much pumpkin.
No, pumpkin
Very
is
subjective.
Pumpkin
very
is
subjective.
Well, let's, we need a subjective outsider, someone who is from far away.
That would be an objective outsider.
Yes,
but
like
yes,
someone who is literally on the other side of the globe right now.
Someone who is literally standing upside down in relation to how we are standing.
Exactly. Someone who is like that gentleman
Where could
sitting
we
over there.
Find a person like
is
that?
That Luke? Luke, how you doing?
He's sitting on his head. Oh wait, no, that's just
who you calling pumpkin? Oh, hi guys.
Hey, Luke. Luke. This is great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us from your podcast, keeping us
not on the show. He's in Dunkin' Donuts.
Well, yes, of course it is. And so, Luke, how has been the wonderful world of video games now? Your show just hit 100, right? 100 episodes?
That's it. Party loaded 100. We recorded last night. So I went to sleep and then suddenly woke up on another show. That's how this works.
That's how it works. Exactly. You woke up at Dunkin' Donuts.
The whirlwind press circuit of a micro celebrity on the internet.
Now you've hit 100 episodes. You've got to do the whole podcast row. You got to do all the shows. Right. Talk about how, the level of success, which is fantastic. So that's awesome. So
hopefully you haven't abused anybody on the way up the ladder. That's
right.
Just...
Right.
No. This is only the beginning of our world tour. So I'll start with D6G and just see how many people I can get offside from there.
Well, we're flattered that we're the first, and maybe we won't be the last.
Sure,
yeah.
You're my go-to punching bags always, guys.
I appreciate it. That's great.
There we go.
So, Luke, I never get to talk about video games on the show anymore. So, since we're going to have you on the main show here, I can't wait to talk about it. But even before then, first of all, Luke, what would you like to get from Dunkin' Donuts here? What's your favorite fall snack, as it were, from Dunkin' Donuts?
Oh my God, I had such a fill last time. I'm actually going to ease off and just have a very boring sort of what we call flat white coffee over here. I'm not going to eat anything because I've got PAX Oz coming up next week, and I'm going to be doing my fair share of indulging there.
Yeah. Save yourself.
Now let me ask you this, Luke.
Save the calories.
So at the other coffee shop, the one mostly found everywhere except New England. Actually, it's New England too. Starbucks. They don't just call it a flat white coffee. They call it an American flat white. So
that seems bizarre to me.
Is it an Australian? Is it like an Aussie flat white down there? What do you guys call it? Just flat white?
From my experience, the biggest difference is that Australian coffee is not rubbish. So,
wow,
I'm not a fan of your American brewer.
Okay, fair.
Sorry,
I think. All right. Look, we got to send you some coffee. That's next plan. Send Luke coffee. I'm writing that down. So look, I do never get to talk about video games. So, but I wanted to ask you this. So this year, one of the main show, we'll talk about our favorite games that we've been playing lately. But I really wanted to ask you a little bit about what your feeling are on the current state of the console. And we should probably throw PCs in there. But the best way to play a game right now is the best way to play a game on. And I don't want to get into the religious war of consoles, but more around just the idea of, we're kind of in the middle of a generation switch, right? With or are we? I don't even know what's happening, except that there's a PS4 Pro, there's an Xbox One X coming out. There's Microsoft seems to be every 2 years. They're almost like Apple now. They just come out with a new flavor of their console that's slightly better. Then we've got the Switch, which seems to be a new thing, or is it just a 3DS that projects to your TV? I don't know. And then we also have, of course, PC gaming. The whole Steam situation seems to have come of age. So what's your take on where we are right now in the console video game thing?
It kind of starts with the key question of what kind of games do you like to play? Because there's a lot of different options at the moment, and the answer that is correct for you might be different for other people. So, what kind of stuff do you like to play, Russ? If you had to sort of start from the top there, what's your favored game time spent in?
So I think I am mostly story driven, which means which generally removes all MMOs. from the mix, although there's some exceptions to that, but I don't do that. And I'm at an age now where I can't be bothered to build and maintain my own rig. So, not that there's anything wrong with that. I would love to. I'm just getting too old for that. So it's more of a failing on my part, a recognition of my age. So I want to be able to, I primarily want to be able to lounge on my couch with the largest screen in my house having my game on it. So that generally leads me in the direction of console, although I'm aware you can plug your PCs into those things. And then the second part is I'm generally story-driven. So I'm really looking for the titles that have great stories, although I do like games where I can communicate with my friends. So not MMOs so much, but like if the game's got a mode where you can do some gameplay that might affect the single-player version, or if there's a co-op mode particularly, I like that. Does that make sense? Did I put enough caveats?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. So Craig, if and when you get to play a video game or two, what sort of stuff do you like to gravitate towards?
There was a time when I would actually go over to Russ's apartment and watch him play video games. So I just like the visuals. I like stunning visual. I like all of the screen caps that Russ posts of all the cool looking games that he plays. And I don't really enjoy playing them, even if I have the time. So I will just watch Russ play one of his cool story-driven video games.
Yes, well, we did that in the 90s, Luke. That was called Twitch 0.1.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, it's funny. Like,
exactly.
you feel bad about, not playing it and instead spending a lot of your time watching people. And I did the same when I was young too. Like, I did both. But the reality is there's a multi-billion-dollar industry based on exactly that behavior now.
Right. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. It's interesting what you both say, and Russ, I totally get you. I think that you'd be in the same boat as a lot of people these days. PC gaming. Maybe we'll finish with that one because that's probably a good sort of link to some of the other themes that we would cover talking about the other consoles. I often find the easiest place to start is with the two that are most similar to each other. So talking about the Xbox and the PlayStations of the world. So now you have a PS4. Am I right?
have both consoles. Well, here's the thing. So I've gotten to the point now where I have multiple Xboxes at my house, and I have a single PS4. So that's where I am now. Mostly under the guise of, under the excuse that I've cut cable, and so I need some sort of box attached to every television in the home that allows me to stream video. And I have cleverly crafted the narrative that requires a gaming console for that to work. Everybody knows that, of course.
Absolutely true.
Absolutely true, as long as you ignore things like Chromecast. But yes. But to be fair, when I first started down this path, Chromecast and Apple TV existed, but a Chromecast and others were not quite around yet. So, but for only slightly more than those prices, especially if you don't need the latest version, right? You can have these things, and they also happen to be great gaming rigs, so you can do multiplayer gaming. Because I also have two daughters, so I want to be in a position where when a particularly good co-op or multiplayer experience comes out, and this is the problem, right? So a lot of, we all like Halo, so when Halo, a 4-player co-op Halo comes out, you need 3 consoles to play that, right? There's not split. There was split screen co-op for 2 players, but there's never been for 3. So there was one version, but in any case, you need the multiple consoles for most games to do that. Or if we want to play Overwatch together or things like that, we'll do that too. So that is sort of part of that also.
Yeah, it's true. The split screen sort of format of a lot of games is not as common these days as it was in the past. So, no, I mean, certainly we've kind of evolved since the point where I know you were huge into the Xbox 360 because that was very much a home entertainment sort of machine. It was built around that whole environment of turning your house into an all-purpose sort of entertainment setup. And that still exists these days, but they probably moved a bit more away from that and onto the game specifically. So, yeah. So let's start with PlayStation, because PlayStation is by no doubt the market leader at the moment in terms of the console race, if you want to call it that. So PlayStation are doing exceedingly well. And the biggest reason why that is, I believe, and I don't think anyone would seriously disprove this, is because PlayStation have got the best catalog of first-party and exclusive titles on the market. So what that means is basically Sony have done deals with different developers and publishers, and they've managed to secure for themselves some of the hottest games on the market that are not available to play anywhere else. And that's a big deal when it comes to trying to choose between one of the consoles. So now, I suspect, Russ, that you own a few of those exclusives, and that may have actually impacted on your choice to pick up a PlayStation. So you're a bit of an Uncharted fan, as I understand.
Yes, well, that's exactly right. So we did get a PlayStation 4 because there were a couple of games on the kids' Christmas list that were only our PS4 exclusives. So, there were several that I wanted to own too. So I did eventually get a PS4, and when the Pro came out, we ended up getting a Pro because I also wanted to experience 4K gaming, and while the Xbox S does have 4K video, it doesn't really have 4K gaming. The X will. So I figured, well, I want to get a 4K TV, and we got that for Christmas. And I was like, well, we might as well get the PlayStation 4 so we can experience that and try it out and really see if there's a difference. And there is a discernible difference. So that was pretty exciting for me to be able to have that and to get some of those games, and then also be able to get to the PS4 library of games. We'll talk about more on the main show, but I'm a huge Tomb Raider fan. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. Of course, Uncharted is just a well understood, was the game on PS4 I always wanted to play. So there was that. There was, Zero Dawn. There was a couple other games that my kids wanted to play, and then Persona 5 was coming out. So there's a bunch of games that there was at least 4 or 5 games that I felt like would make it worth the price of admission, and it has. We haven't regretted it at all. I will say, though, that the kids still prefer, and so do I, to play on the Xbox. So if there is a game coming out that's on both titles, we will play the Xbox, but that's probably more nostalgia / personal, like just experience on it, so we know everything is, and the controllers we're used to them because we play with them so long. That's probably more to that than there is some sort of actual quality difference. It's just more of a preference, personal preference.
Controller choice, I find, sort of plays into it quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of the DualShock 4, the PlayStation 4 controller. I think it's probably one of the best controllers on the market for what I prefer. But yeah, that's definitely a point of difference for a lot of people. Because I know you guys love stats, I've actually got some to throw at you just to sort of paint a bit of a picture here.
Excellent.
How they stack up next to each other. So.
I do love my data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, bring the data.
So at last calculation, if we were looking at the number of exclusive titles that have been revealed on each of the platforms for 2017, if you look across the list, you've got Nintendo Switch and Xbox One very close to each other, sitting on around the mid-60s, so 66, 67 at last count, whereas PlayStation 4 this year has got 103 available on the list. Wow. So they're streaks ahead as far as the stuff that you can only play on that platform goes. But there are a couple of differences that give Xbox an advantage in that race, namely being that they have a lot of games that are actually able to be purchased and played on both PC and Xbox.
Right.
So they've got a program called the Xbox Play Anywhere program. Not every game fits into that. There's only certain titles that do. Gears of War 4 is one that I can remember being one of the early ones. So if you buy that... Halo Wars 2, yeah, that's another good one for sure. So you can buy those games on PC and actually play them on your Xbox One as well.
And your saves crossover. That's actually pretty cool because, I travel for work, and so it's nice to be able to. Well, I don't have a super powerful laptop. It's powerful enough to play some of the games like Halo Wars 2. So to be able to play it on my Xbox and then while I'm traveling on my laptop to play more is pretty sweet without having to buy a separate license. Another thing you can do with Xbox, and I only have one PS4, so I've never tried this, but one of the things Microsoft allows is how game licensing works. And so this probably matters if you have a roommate who games or if you have kids. So, as I mentioned, when some of these games come out, like Halo Wars 2 is a good example. You want to play with your kids and play together. Or Gears of War 4 has got a great co-op all the way through the campaign modes. You want to play it together, right? So how do you do that? Well, you need 2 consoles, and then you would also need 2 copies of the game, except you don't with Xbox. So on your Xbox, you have your primary console, right? And so that console, anybody can play a game you own on that console, even if you're not logged in. And then if you're logged in on a different console and you bought the game, you can play the game on that console. So if I buy a game under my Xbox gamer tag, anybody in my house can play on my primary Xbox, which is the one in the living room, and then I can play on any Xbox as long as I'm logged in. right? So you can basically, two people can play with a single license of a game legally, totally legit. And then if my other kid wants to play, then we got to buy one more license. So you basically do manage to save one license if you can do that. I don't know if the PS4 does that, but they may. But the Xbox,
PS4 does. I don't think the Switch does, though. I could be corrected, but I'm pretty sure that Switch is still a bit problematic in that respect. So,
and that's a super nice feature. And I was bummed when Microsoft first announced the Xbox One. They were initially pitching that all games were essentially digital. The disc could be thrown away after you bought it. And you had like 5 to 10 licenses you could share, but you could never sell the game. And it was hilarious what happened. The gaming industry freaked out. Even video game fans freaked out. They thought they were getting screwed. And I was looking at it going, that's awesome. How is that not great? You and 5 of your friends all pitch in $10. You get a $50 video game, and you each get a copy that you can play concurrently. How is that a bad thing? Right? So I was like freaking out that they were. And so because Microsoft gets such a backlash about having to be always online for that feature to work, they went back to the current model, which is pretty good, but it would have been much better. It would have been much better if my entire household, for example, could play on a single license of a game, because it would just make these multiplayer games even more compelling and a better value. So I was sad with it.
That game sharing controversy was quite hilarious at the time. Actually, Sony responded and actually came out with a short commercial at the time, which it still gives me a chuckle to this day, where they sort of say, this is how you can share games on a PlayStation 4. And it's basically two guys standing next to each other, literally just handing a game to each other. It's so funny. So it was a nice little stab at the Xbox there. One of the big sort of points of contention that's been coming up a lot this year between the two platforms has actually been the idea of cross-platform play as well. Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of titles where this is something that is possible in different ways and should be possible from Xbox to PlayStation, but for whatever reason, and that reason is basically a commercial interests reason, right. They haven't enabled cross-platform play on both systems. Minecraft is probably the best example. So Minecraft has actually recently had a huge update to the game, and you're aware that Minecraft is a game that basically sits on just about every platform known to man. You can play it on iPhone, iPad, tablets, PC,
every
consoles.
Kind of your phone.
This I can speak to because we have it on 5 different platforms.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's pretty common. But the thing up until recently is that all of the versions of the game has been slightly different on each of the different platforms. So they've actually had iterations on the game and things added that have been added on different ones at different times. So they recently released what they're calling the Better Together update, which basically brings all of those different disparate versions of Minecraft together to run on the same engine, which means that they now for the first time are cross-compatible. So you can play in the same world if you're on a tablet versus a phone versus PC versus Xbox. The older versions of the consoles, it's not the case. You can't, the version of Minecraft on, say, like a PS3 or Xbox 360 still exists in its own bubble and it's not cross-compatible, but all of the modern ones are. Switch is coming next year. Right. Next year. So, but the one exception to all of this is PlayStation 4, because Sony decided they didn't want to play nice. Right. So,
and I think Microsoft, that's something I think Microsoft's doing better of with their new CEO. So, most people probably know Microsoft bought Minecraft a few years ago. So Minecraft is now a Microsoft product. It could easily have become an Xbox exclusive, but that's not how Microsoft runs anymore. So one of the things that Microsoft does now, and this is a very different stance under Steve Ballmer. Under Ballmer, it was always try to make our stuff work best on our hardware. And now, though, it's we will make the best software anywhere. And that was always Microsoft's original goal under Bill Gates, was we want to be the operating system on every hardware, right? So now Microsoft makes really, really good versions of Microsoft Office, for example, that run on iOS, even though Apple is technically a competitor to Microsoft, right? So it does not surprise me that Microsoft now is trying to get Minecraft to work fine on a PS4, which it does, but they're trying to bridge the gap there. I think the worry, and I don't really understand the worry exactly why PlayStation wouldn't do this, except the worry might be there is a perception. Well, there's two perceptions. One, there's a perception that Xbox Live is more robust and more secure than PlayStation Network, but there's also a perception that there's more that PlayStation Network is more polite and more adult than the voices you hear on Xbox Live. Now, whether or not those two things are true or not, I do wonder if Microsoft is just a better network company than Sony is, and I wonder if Sony is a little concerned about Xbox Live sort of consuming the PlayStation Network. I wonder about that, but I don't know.
I can tell you what it is because it's none of those things.
Okay, what do you think it is?
So PlayStation or Sony might claim that it's those things, but that is not true. It is plain as day. The reason why this is happening, there's no technical limitations per se that would prevent this. In fact, there's actually been a couple of games recently that notably have accidentally turned on the crossplay feature and then had to very hurriedly turn it off because it's not permitted. Rocket League's another good example too, because you can crossplay Rocket League between PS4 and PC and Xbox One and PC, but not with Xbox One and PS4. So what the hell? The reason why this is all happening is because PlayStation is leading the market race at the moment. And they don't have to play nice because it's in their commercial interest to try and retain as much of their player base as they possibly can without diluting it with crossplay. So it's as simple as that. It's just a money thing. Microsoft and Xbox have everything to gain from trying to tap into some of that user share, whereas Sony is far enough ahead that they don't need to do that. And retaining what they have is absolutely of best commercial interest to them. So unfortunately, that's the reason why gamers at the end of the day would benefit greatly from it, particularly for smaller games, which could benefit from a much higher player count, particularly for multiplayer options. But the commercial and business side of things, unfortunately, is getting in the way with this one. So yeah, and honestly, if I was upper management as far as Sony goes, I would probably see the sense in it too. So it's not a surprise. Yeah,
it's a shame, but you're right. It's not going to switch. So which console are you going to buy next, Luke? Do you have a PS4 Pro?
I don't have a Pro, largely because I don't actually have a 4K TV yet. So there's not a huge benefit to me doing that. I did contemplate getting a Pro for the purposes of picking up a PlayStation VR set.
Yes.
But I haven't yet. And the reason why is because, and VR was something we spoke about a fair bit when I was on last year, because that was kind of one of the key central themes of 2016 in video games. Now, VR certainly hasn't gone away, but it is very much a slow burn as far as it building up in the market. PlayStation is now, in terms of the number of VR headsets available in the market, way ahead of its closest competitors in the form of Oculus and Vive. The HTC Vive, and a big reason for that is because there's more PlayStations out there. It's as simple as that.
Well, that was the other reason I got a PS4. So I was really curious about VR, and my kids were sort of starting to express an interest in it, and I just thought from the perspective of just being up on technology that I wanted to have it. And the PS4, in addition to the reason, the back catalog, the library, the exclusives I was interested in, was the lowest cost of entry to VR, right? I mean, the cost of a PS4, even a Pro, plus PlayStation VR is way, way cheaper than the kind of rig you would need, plus all the equipment you would need to go down any VR route on PC. So I really, that for me was another bonus thought. Well, let's just get the console now, and I'll be positioned later for the VR, right?
VR's a real double-edged sword at the moment. It's a question of accessibility for a lot of people, because there is obviously an extra cost involved in getting the headset and equipment, which is a lot less on PlayStation than it is with the PC alternatives. So
it's still expensive. I mean, the fully kitted out VR extension for the PlayStation 4 is still like $300. So it's not
absolutely
it's not cheap. It's like doubling the cost of the console, really.
It's quite a bit. I mean, they are making inroads into making some of these headsets cheaper. Facebook actually had a recent conference in the last week or so where they unveiled a new low-cost Oculus, which is going to be about $200 when it hits market. So it's quite cheap. Nice. And it's, I believe it's cordless as well. So that's a big plus for people, because we're sort of looking for the next iteration of the hardware where you're not going to be tethered to your machine, but they're not quite there yet as far as the technology goes. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to the games. It always comes down to what games are available. Is this worth me picking up the equipment to actually play? Is it good enough? And that's where they're not there just yet. They really need to sort of reach this momentum where there's a point of critical mass where developers see the value in developing games for virtual reality, so that they're willing to put the time and effort into that investment. Because at the moment, it's a risky proposition. Like, if they spend a lot of time developing a game for a virtual reality platform, and there's just not that many people out there with a VR headset compared to those with without, why would you want to develop for that platform? Unless you can sort of, have the best of both worlds and build a game that can kind of cross the boundaries and be played with or without VR. And Bethesda are actually doing that quite well at the moment. They've developed a new version of Doom and also Skyrim, because Skyrim is, again, one of those games that apparently will exist on every platform known to man. And that's coming out real soon, actually. I think it's towards the end of this year. And they would absolutely be fun to play on VR. But again, it's one of those games that you can still play without having it. So the only other sort of VR seller that has really stuck out this year has actually been Resident Evil 7, which released in January. And that one got huge, positive press for being a completely terrifying and immersive VR experience. Right. Although technically you can play that without VR too. I've been holding off playing that game deliberately until I can get hold of a VR headset because I want to be scared senseless by it. I think that sounds like a great time. But yeah, there's just not anything yet that makes you sort of say, I cannot experience this unless I have VR. Right. So as soon as that game drops, I think we'll see a shift in it. But at the moment, Sony's putting a lot of effort into their VR catalog. None of the other consoles are, and that's actually probably to the detriment of the whole thing, because if more competition, a rising tide floats all boats. This is something that Sony actually wants to have some competition for. So yeah.
I think it's interesting that the push for augmented reality. Apple's going that route. Microsoft's going that route with the HoloLens. So we'll see where it ends up. I think VR as a gaming platform is a really cool idea, but they still have to figure some of the things out with, motion sickness and everything else, which I think is another challenge for the area. We'll see. I was almost sucked in for Bridge Commander, so I was like I was dangerously close to that. So, but I managed to resist because again, it's one title and it's a lot of money for one or two games.
Absolutely.
So. All right, so you're saying you're on the edge with the PS4 Pro. I have pre-ordered my Xbox One X, so I've already done it because I'm pretty much all in on the Xbox platform anyway. And I just wanted I wanted to see, now that I've got the 4K television, you got to have, some of the games are going to upscale, no problem, or have actually 4K content. Microsoft's doing some really interesting things to try to help you prepare. I don't know if you've been watching this. So they have the ability now. They just launched a new system update 2 days ago, and now and I've never seen them do this. I've never seen this done before. And I think this generation is really weird. So games are releasing now that have 4K content for the Xbox One X. So the current Forza 7 just came out. That's got it. I think I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that are going to have it. I think Shadow of War is going to have it, or it already does because I think it's got it for the PS4 Pro. I think they're going to have it on Assassin's Creed. And what they're doing is, because these games are coming out prior to the Xbox One X's release, there's actually a little setting you can go into your Xbox, and you can say pre-download the 4K content. Now, the reason that sounds weird is because I'm going to buy the X and I still need to download over there. But the other thing Microsoft just released is it's now possible to transfer games from one console to the other via your LAN. So prior to this latest update, to move a game from one Xbox to another, you had to essentially either have an external hard drive or have a USB stick, or most commonly you would just re-download it again, because you can download as many times as you want. You just can only play it if you're logged in. So you could re-download it again, but that takes forever over the internet, because these are like 30 gig games. So but now that you can copy from one console to the other right over your LAN, it's pretty quick. So the idea is, if it's the day or two before the Xbox One X comes out, or the week before, you can preload, download all the 4K content on your current Xbox One. And then when the X enters your home, you just transfer all over the data over your LAN, and you're ready to play on the X, which is kind of an interesting. It's very sort of PC feeling, right? Because it's a pretty technical thing to do, and most console owners probably won't take advantage of it. I thought it was sort of an interesting approach for those diehard gamers who really want to have 4K on day one.
Mm-hmm. From the perspective of an Australian, because we come from a country where our internet is probably worse than what you'd find in Ethiopia. Right. It's a real good feature. So I can definitely see the value in not having to download extra content like that. I especially like the idea of them separating those 4K elements from the games too, so that if you don't own an Xbox One X, you don't have to download all of that extra stuff, because that could take up a lot of space.
Yeah, that's well. They've been working on the progressive downloading, right? So they've always had this thing for a while now where a chunk of the game can download like 20% and you can start playing it while the rest downloads in the background, but you don't really get much past the tutorials. But now apparently they're doing a better job of things like you're talking about, where if your console, because they now have essentially multiple genres or multiple different levels of power for your gaming rig, right? I mean, for your console, because you could be running an Xbox One, an Xbox One S, which is technically slightly more powerful, or an X, which is significantly more powerful with 4K. And so you could download different content for those things. And so I think it's kind of interesting. The other thing they're starting to think about doing is bifurcating single player from multiplayer. So you don't have to download the multiplayer content unless you're going to use it, or download the single player content if you're only going to use multiplayer. So I thought that was kind of an interesting idea too. So they are looking at ways for folks with lower bandwidth. But even me, I mean, we get 256 down here, which is pretty fast. But I still, it's still several hours to download. So it's usually typically overnight I set the downloads up,
Yeah. 256 down. God, I'm seething with rage right now. Anyway,
that's not even good for. I mean, I'm still considered kind of weak. I mean, I know folks who live in the city with fiber to their house, and they're like, 256 down. I'm getting a gig per second. I'm like, shut up. Just shut up. But anyway, so Luke, you're looking at and of course you mentioned, what are you liking about the Switch? So are you going to go buy yourself a Switch?
I am going to go and buy myself a Switch. I'm absolutely going to do that. I'm probably going to do that in the next couple of weeks, actually. So the Switch is Nintendo's latest offering, and it is basically the engine by which they have got themselves back on top of the game, because their last platform, the Wii U, was not a huge success story. I think it's fair to say. Its lifespan wasn't particularly long compared to some of the other things that they've had in the past. The library was lacking. There were definitely some standouts in it. If you want to go and play some quality Wii U games, there's still the likes of Super Mario Maker and Bayonetta 2 and Splatoon made its debut on the Wii U, of course. But already the Switch is looking like they've addressed that problem, and there's some pretty exciting first-party titles that are in the mix to come out in the very near future and sort of leading off into the slightly more distant future as well. So the Switch launched, of course, with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild being available on that as a launch title, as well as that coming out on the Wii U as well. That is one that was so exciting to people that really drove early sales of the Switch to be able to play.
Pretty much, right? I mean, there wasn't really anything else significantly out on it, and that game alone sold the console, right?
Here's the insane stats on it. There were actually more copies of the Switch version of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sold than Switches. So for some reason, people were buying multiple copies of this game for the platform, even though they didn't have the platform yet, because Nintendo has been plagued by a few supply issues this year, which, they've got a weird way of doing things sometimes. Sometimes the lack of supply actually generates additional demand because people get a bit crazy and excited. Right. And, they've certainly seen that recently when they've re-released mini versions of their older consoles, like the Mini NES and the Mini SNES.
Right.
But now they've finally addressed those supply problems, and they're gearing up production massively for the holiday season this year. And people are back onto it. The Switch is one of the hottest consoles right now because of the stuff that is now available and coming out. Nintendo have really turned around this year and have a great relationship with indie developers as well. So there's a lot of really cool indie games. And Russ, I know you're a bit of a fan of some of the indies that are available to play on PC, which you'll now be able to play on the Switch. And some of these games are fantastic fits for what the Switch can do as a mobile platform. If you were to do some research on how most people are playing the Switch at the moment, because there's, of course, a couple of main ways you can play it. You can play it as a large sort of tablet-style platform, which is, a bit bigger than, your 3DS, but it performs a similar sort of function with the touchscreen and the portability. Or you can play it docked, which is essentially using it as a household console on your big screen TV. Now, it does sacrifice a little bit of the power that exists in, say, your PlayStation and your Xbox to do that. So some of the games you'll see on the Switch are not quite as involved. But that being said, they've got some that push the boundaries. I mean, when you're talking your Breath of the Wild, that's a meaty game, and it does a lot with the processing power that it has available. And there are certainly some spectacular titles available on the Switch. But if you want to play, really flexibly, if you want to play some great titles, and if you're a fan of the Nintendo sort of lineup, and that will be all of your sorts of favorites like Splatoon and your Marios and even your Sonics these days sort of appear on the Nintendo. And the one that excites me more than I can possibly describe is at some point in the next couple of years, we're going to see a new entry in the 3D Metroid franchise. So Metroid Prime 4 is going to be coming soon, and that got me so excited. That's a good reason to own that platform. I have held off buying one only because I was waiting for Super Mario Odyssey to come out, and that's hitting next week. So as soon as that is out, I will be picking it up like a shot because I think it's going to be
So you're
great.
waiting for two games, essentially. You wanted Zelda and Mario, right?
Well, I've got Zelda already. I had to play Zelda on the Wii U, as it turned out, because we were doing review content for it. But right. I couldn't wait. And now my sons have actually got that because they've got a Wii U in the house, and it's been really fantastic watching them play it because, kids and Nintendo games, it's just a weird thing. It's so intuitive, yeah. And my eldest Ben, who's 8, he's actually accomplished a lot more in that game than I possibly could have. He's just got that dedication and focus to it. It's a great platform, and I think that there's a lot of nostalgic Nintendo fans out there that'll connect to a lot of what they're doing. So
awesome. Well, Luke, thank you so much for joining us here in Dunkin' Donuts. This has been a great conversation. I'm excited. You almost have me buying a Switch now, but I'm going to have to. I got to get my X first, so I one console at a time, as it were.
For sure. I'll put up some video content of some cool Switch games, and you can watch that and tell me if you change your mind.
All right, I can live vicariously through you, which I think many of your listeners and viewers probably do. So Luke, thanks again. I can't wait to have you on the main show here in about a week or so to talk more about video games and other excitement. Thanks again.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
It's good.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.